Hi everyone, and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host, Yvonne Heath, author of Love Your Life to Death and founder of the I Just Showed Up movement. Today I'm so excited that Kevin Cutler is joining us to share his message. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Yvonne.
Thank you so much for being here today. So I've known Kevin for many years as an educator, as a principal of the school my son attended. Much to my dismay, we did spend a lot of time together. We'll just leave it at that.
Wasn't that much time.
But now you are a facilitator for a wonderful organization. The letters are IIRP, and
right.
What is IIRP and what do you do?
Hey, IIRP is the International Institute for Restorative Practice.
Restorative Practice.
And they are based out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. However, they are an international organization, so we have affiliates in Europe, Latin America, Australia, Central America, and Canada. So I'm a trainer, facilitator for IIRP Canada.
Okay. And so as a facilitator, what do you do? What do you teach?
Well, we teach a lot of things, but we do workshops, like many people do, and our workshops focus on the framework of restorative practice, how to run effective circles, how to do conferencing when acts of harm are done.
Okay.
We do another called family group decision making. And our concept is to build capacity in systems, not just schools, any organization, to the point where when we work with them, we train their folks who have been through the training to become trainers as well.
Okay. And so restorative practice, what does that mean? Restorative
practice, I would say, is an emerging social science, and it's about creating participatory learning and participatory decision making so that people feel engaged in an organization, they feel like they have voice, and they feel like they have choice. Okay. Most of what we do is we tend to focus sometimes on restorative justice, which a lot of people have a good understanding of, but that would be something we would teach at the far end of the continuum of what we do.
Okay.
A lot of the work we do, particularly in our school settings, is around building community. And when people feel connected, they feel safe, they feel accepted, and they feel like they're less likely to want to harm anyone else in that setting.
Okay. So you said that sometimes there are circles, restorative practice, when harm is done. So give me an example in the school, something has happened. What has happened and what is the procedure?
Absolutely. So for a serious act of harm, perhaps it is a scenario involving bullying.
Yes.
And
very
commonplace. And I'd like to believe it's not as common as it used to be because of things like restorative practice and how we can utilize it to create a learning opportunity. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So imagine, if you will, one of your children comes to you and is complaining that they're being picked on by other children in the school. So first thing is, fantastic that they come to you.
Yes.
In many cases, children don't.
Right.
And so you bring it to the attention of the school, and they then have a duty to investigate this, and they do, and they find out that the harm that's being done is quite extensive. Okay. And maybe there's some online stuff, and so obviously, there needs to be consequences for behavior. In restorative practice, we never make the claim that there shouldn't be.
Right.
However, we also believe that the purpose of discipline is to teach.
Yes.
And so if someone has been harmed, this needs to be a learning experience for them. And if somebody has caused harm, this needs to be a learning experience for them. So one of the things we know is that merely punitive responses to things like that not only do not make the person who has been harmed feel any safer.
Right.
In fact, they quite often feel like there's been no justice done at all.
Right.
And then, strangely enough, we expect those children to come back together and coexist as if none of this happened.
So if someone was suspended or detention, then you think that's going to fix it, and then next time they see each other, they're going to be friends. That doesn't even make sense.
Right. And so what we learn is that the more punitive your response on a regular basis with certain individuals, the less likely they are to learn from that and improve their behavior.
Right.
So there may be consequences, serious consequences for children who engage in serious bullying behavior. Police may be involved. However, what we've learned is that they should be given the opportunity to restore relationships.
Okay.
They should be given the opportunity to deal with their shame, and they should be given the opportunity for a ritual of reintegration back into the school, back into the class, back into the setting. Without that, they never deal with the issues that may have been at the bottom of all of this. So a restorative conference would be for a very serious situation where we bring the people who have been affected together.
Yes. Okay.
So imagine, if you will, again, if we were using one of your children as an example, which I hope you don't mind on doing that.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you. I should have asked this
That's
right
okay.
off the bat. So you would be there
Yes.
with your
as
child?
a parent.
As a parent, so the parents would be there.
Yep.
The children who have been that have caused this, if they acknowledge the harm that they've done.
Okay, so that's the first step. Okay.
If they acknowledge that. And their parents and people from the school, perhaps even the police, and others who have been affected.
And the person who did the harm as well, of course, right?
Person or persons.
Or persons, okay.
Right. And so we ask them questions. We have a script. And we ask questions of the people that have caused the harm.
Yes.
And we ask questions of the person who has been harmed.
Okay.
And I would usually meet with all of these people beforehand.
Right.
Because the conference needs to be safe.
Sure.
For everyone.
And there's going to be anger. I mean, parents, like Mama Bear, you have to control and allow conversations.
I expect there to be emotion.
Sure.
In fact, I would encourage it.
Okay.
However, as facilitator, I have a responsibility that the safety of all the people in the circle is primary.
Right.
And so that's why I meet with people beforehand. So when I ask them the questions, and
so we have the questions here.
We give these out to our schools.
Little card,
on this
yes.
card. And so the questions that we ask is, we would ask the perpetrators. First question is, what happened?
What happened?
And what were you thinking at the time? What have you been thinking about since? Who has been affected by what you have done, and in what way? And so the last question is, what do you think you need to do to make things right? I hold off on that one.
Okay.
What question did you notice is not there?
Oh, a very important question that we always ask why?
Why?
Why did you do it?
Why did you do it? And if it's on the media, they always say, and no reason was given why.
Right. We want to know why you did it.
Think about the last time that question was effective with one of your children.
Right. Why'd you do that?
Why did you put the cat in the dryer?
Because I wanted to see it spin.
Yeah.
Okay, you wanted to see it spin.
Yeah, they wanted to name it Fluffy. I don't know.
But that's not going to fix it anyways. And what does it matter what the why was, right?
And they may not have an answer to that question, or they may.
Right.
It may not be what you want to hear.
Right.
So what we're most interested in is, what were you thinking at the time? And sometimes we make presumptions about what a person was thinking or a motive that simply is not true.
Yes.
And then, what have you thought about since? It's a powerful question for other people to hear the answer to, because they may say something like, I'm feeling terrible about what happened. When that moment comes in a conference, you see the countenance of people, and if you're familiar with affect script psychology, in terms of our affects being how we portray feelings and emotions, you may see people sitting like this in anger. And then as these questions start to be answered, you start seeing the body language change and moving forward, and the eye contact happening. I believe we're naturally hardwired to want that to happen, that we can't live in that state of anxiety forever. And this is a visual that we use all the time.
Yes.
It's called a Hoberman sphere.
Okay.
And that when people are feeling very stressed and anxious, like when they come into a setting like that, they're closed.
Okay.
And a very small child told us one time, when I'm feeling like this, nothing can get in and nothing can come out.
And that's from a small child, had that wisdom.
Kindergarten.
Okay.
The wisest people on earth, no doubt.
Absolutely, yes.
So if people can begin to open up,
Wow.
then things start to come in and things start to come out. And
Brilliant.
so with all of what we do in restorative practice, you know, I could have a child sitting waiting for me in the office, and some of our educators use this. When they see the child,
Yes.
and
You
it's
just
like-
feel that when you do that too,
and the child's
right?
holding it, and what they're telling me is they're not ready to talk to me right now.
Sure. Arms are crossed.
And so maybe they start to open up a little bit later, and then, you know, maybe I walk by and they go like that. But then later on they start, and then that's when I can start asking these questions.
Right.
And I'm more
And
likely.
you're going to get in.
Right.
You're going to get in.
And so the other part of the conference, and this is vital, is what are the questions we ask of the person that's being harmed?
Right.
And so a lot of what we talk about in our workshops is, well, if somebody's been harmed, what do they need? Do they need just to be told that, yeah, we expelled that student and you're never going to see them again?
Right.
Well,
Which is untrue. They're
Well,
going to see them.
I hate to say this. What happened in Florida recently was an expelled student. And I'm not stating that that's all the reasons why.
Right.
But when someone has been victimized, that's not necessarily what they're looking for.
Right.
So we ask them these questions.
Yes.
What did you think when you realized what had happened? So again, if we say your child suddenly sees a very inappropriate post made about themselves
Right.
on Facebook or Instagram, what were you thinking when you saw that? So they'll say, I was shocked. I thought these people were my friends, these sorts of things. What impact has this incident had on you and others? It is very, very important for children, if this is a learning experience, to understand how their actions affect people.
Yes,
Not just the
absolutely.
person who's sitting in front of them or beside them, but
Everybody.
everybody. And then what has been the hardest thing for you?
Wow.
Again, people need to hear that.
Yes.
And then lastly, what do you think needs to happen to make things right? So in the last part of the conference, everyone
Everyone.
gets an opportunity
I
to
think that's
contribute to that.
incredible. Parents, teachers, the person harmed, the person who did the harm, everyone has a voice.
And so for the person who's been harmed, one of the things that we notice when they're answering these questions is, I'm having an opportunity to tell my story and people believe me. People
Yes.
believe me.
Yes.
And then I have an opportunity to talk about how we can make things better. And when the people who have been directly affected have the opportunity then to say what restoration is going to look like, they almost always stick with it at that point. Almost always. Whereas as an administrator, I could impose consequences, I could impose solutions. You will write an apology letter to this person.
The forced apology.
Yeah.
That's very effective, isn't it?
And then it's not even necessarily nicely received.
Sure.
If you know you've been given an apology letter because you were forced to do so.
Yes. Not because they're sorry, because they are forced. And we've all done that, right? Say you're sorry. Say you're sorry. I've done it. And when I read it in the book, I felt, well, isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah.
Making someone say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're
Or-
saying what happened?
Or I say to, I would like an apology from this person. Well, when they're feeling like this,
Yep.
they may say something else other than an
Oh,
apology
yeah.
at that point.
Beep.
And we have a tendency sometimes to think that when we're working with our children, we're working with each other, that when something happens, we need to resolve this by the end of the day. And so constantly coming in
Right. In that.
is going to cause other responses. So
Sure.
it's okay to say, okay, we're going to talk about this. We are going to have a conversation, but I'll come back to it.
Yes.
I'll come back to it.
I think that's a really important point also. We want to fix things and we want to fix them now, and we want to hear you say you're sorry. And another thing I read, which now doesn't make any sense, you said when people are remorseful or feel regret, they may put their head down and not make eye contact, right? And what do we say? Look at me when I'm talking to you. Or yeah, you look at me right now.
Look me in the eye.
Yeah, look me in the eye. It's like, well, if I'm putting my head down, maybe I feel, ashamed of what I did or remorseful. So that would probably be a better, more appropriate response.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, physiologically, for any of us, that's really hard to do. I'm going to look at somebody who I've just harmed.
Sure, of course.
That's very difficult to do. So the physiological responses that we have when we're doing a conference or we're doing a circle with kids, not necessarily a formal conference, but we may be doing a circle with a group of people, and we're talking about things that aren't going well, and you'll see people looking down. I've done circles with adults that are having difficulty with each other at work.
Sure.
And you see that same body language, but nobody ever yells across a circle, "Look at me when I'm talking to you."
No, I know.
And then, let's stick to the issue that we're dealing with. And I wouldn't fight against that, because it's good to see when you go through the process using these questions, either formally or informally, how that opportunity to speak starts to open them up. Their knowledge that they're being treated fairly.
Yes.
And then the body language does change.
Yes.
And those things happen.
I've been in a situation where, I was so closed and someone who caused harm, and I finally had a conversation with that person, and I asked similar questions, what were you thinking, and how do you feel now? And, to see them remorseful, and it diffused my own anger. It opened me up, and then I just felt sadness over what happened. But at the end of the day, we cannot change what has happened, but we can certainly, this is a phenomenal choice, I believe. It's what we can do about it.
Right. Giving
everyone a voice in a safe space.
Right, and that's kind of the fundamental principle of restorative practice, is it's not a program. It's not, there's a lot of great programs out there that you can utilize, but it's more of a way of thinking and being.
Right.
It's a philosophy that I think works well with other programs. So I'm thinking, whenever I was, while I was reading your book, for instance, I couldn't help but think about the connections between your message and the work that I do as well.
Was it a good book?
It's a great book.
Just kidding.
It is one of those books when you read it that impacts you.
Yes.
It nails you right between the eyes. It's like, wow, I wish I'd read this 100 years ago.
Me too. Yes. Just like restorative practice, just all of these things.
Right.
You look back and say, wow, I wish I would have had this tool.
And so your book, and when you're writing about the talk.
The talk, yes.
And so all of the content that you have there, all of the knowledge, all of the wisdom, and the steps in dealing with grief, and that's the content, but people are like, how do I get that started?
Right.
How do we start this? And so some of the work that we do is kind of, well, here's a process that you can use to have the talk.
Yes.
And if you, even without formal training, felt comfortable facilitating a circle of friends, a circle of family, a circle of colleagues, that people trust the process.
Sure.
They
and
feel
are familiar
safe,
with it.
And then they open up and they'll talk. They'll talk. So one visual, and I don't know how well this will show up, but we talked about in the book about the different quadrants that people can operate in.
Yes.
So to, not, for, or with. And so if on one axis we have high expectations, but at the same time we have high support, then we're working with each other.
Yes.
And so too often, whether it be in organizations or in families, schools, we do things to people. And quite often with the best of intentions.
Of course.
But when they don't have that engagement and you're doing things to them, they feel like they're in an authoritarian relationship.
Sure.
Now, there's sometimes that needs to happen, but think about rules, think about policies, think about those sorts of things. How much say did other people have into that?
That's right.
So the other thing that we teach in order to support this is fair process. And that's very much a fundamental principle of restorative practice as well. And so you want people to change. You want a culture change. You want something happening in your family around having those discussions in the talk. So the first step is we need to engage people.
Yes.
And so a circle, and we teach how to facilitate circles well, the first step is engagement. How do I feel safe in that setting with the others and know that I have the opportunity to speak my mind respectfully,
right,
and not be judged or threatened or ridiculed or any of those things.
I'll be heard.
I'll be heard. I have a voice. And so quite often I would use circles with my staff when I had staff before I retired.
Yes.
That at the end of the day, I still have a responsibility for the decision that's being made. And I'm not necessarily in the happiness business, that I may have to make a decision that people are not going to like. However, did they have a voice? So I go away and I have to make a decision.
Yeah.
I'm not having a vote. I'm not trying to compromise. My responsibility as a parent, as a teacher, as a leader is to do the right thing.
Right.
Once that decision has been made, then the next part of fair process is I go back to people and I give them the explanation for the decision.
Sure.
Here are the reasons why this needs to be done. I have heard you. And the third thing that we all need is expectation clarity. Now that this decision is made, what is it I need to do? Am I clear on that? And so it's those expectation clarity pieces that is the support on this access.
Right. Yes.
And it's the engagement that is creating those expectations so people know what they are.
I think there's just so much to be said for this. And when I read this, everybody should read this, I'm letting you know, because the Restorative Practice Handbook, or Practices Handbook, it can be used in your family, at school, in the workplace, but also preventatively, right? Like, so people are familiar with circles and everyone has a voice, so that when harm has been done or there's a situation, it's like, okay, we're already familiar with circles. And wouldn't it be wonderful to already have that in place and just make it a part of our culture?
Yep.
Because when people feel respected and they feel heard and they're not put in the bad category, that's the worst thing we can do to people. And so you're talking about restoring relationships, integration back into their community. Like Suzanne Whitfoley talked about connectedness. We need connectedness. If you're going to push them in the bad group, they're going to connect with the bad group. You know, the bad group, or, you know, label this as a bad kid. No, they made some bad decisions. They caused harm, right? And it's just so important.
And I think that's a great point by Suzanne, because I believe one of the things that probably has always been plaguing society, but is certainly more prominent to me now, is the lack of connection.
Yes.
In our neighborhoods, in our schools,
Yes.
even in our families. And that these processes allow people to create real connection
Yes.
with each other safely. And
they won't be texting each other in the circle, right?
no,
They'll be having a conversation.
No, we create norms of that nature, and
Yes.
you do have to say it explicitly. But I will tell you that right now in the world, in the climate that's been created in some places by some people, that the need to explicitly teach respectful civil discourse between people is real right now.
Yes.
Because in many instances, the people who have been elected or appointed to do those things are not good role models.
Right. And we won't name any names, but
No, but I mean, even if you turn on a reality show tonight,
sure. Yes.
the person who has the most deplorable behavior is probably going to win.
And that's not okay. And we need to create change with that, don't we?
And so when young people are being taught this, modeled it, and I know in some school boards they've done training with all of the educators in their schools.
Yes, which I think is wonderful.
That this is the culture that children understand to be in their schools.
Yes.
That we sit in a circle, we build community. If we disagree, we know how to do that in a respectful way.
Right. And we will disagree. And there will be issues. It's unrealistic to think that that won't happen, but let's have the tools
Yeah.
to do something about it in a constructive way.
Right. So if someone disagrees with you, immediately trashing them on Twitter does not create community.
Right.
Or does not deal with the issue.
Right.
In fact, it's probably the most cowardly and deplorable way to deal with it.
Yes.
Because you're not there to actually see the affects like we do in a circle.
That's right. And we need to create a culture of change. And I think that, again, Restorative Practices Handbook, wonderful way to start. And we could speak for many more hours, but I think that, see, we're already out of time. Can you believe that? I know.
Yeah.
I think we should all go on the road. We have great messages. I'm just saying we'll have to talk more about that.
Absolutely. Yes.
So thank you so much for what you do, Kevin. It's amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing this wonderful information. As I always say this about showing up for yourself, showing up for others, and my call to action is plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks. Bye for now.